So if you clicked on this video, you're probably asking yourself, is the hardware on the P40 Pro so amazingly good? Is the camera so amazingly good that I would actually consider getting that over a Google-enabled Samsung flagship or other flagship phone? That's the question I'm going to try and answer in this video. Huawei have gone with this quad curved design, and apparently Samsung were toying with the idea of doing this as well, but ditched the idea because it wasn't perfected. And yeah, I kind of understand their reasoning. I see where Huawei are going with this design, and I think in general the quad curved display that is curving the glass of the screen on the left and right, on the top and bottom, and in the corners is going to look amazing when it is perfected. For right now, I think the design is a first generation type. It looks really amazing. The screen just looks really great. However, in the corners, because they can't curve the glass, the corner bezels look a little bit dorky and definitely stand out a little bit. It doesn't look 100% elegant as the way that a quad curve should do. I guess once they get the corners right, it's going to look absolutely brilliant. But for right now, I kind of understand why Samsung didn't go with this. But Huawei have gone with it, and I do commend them for trying something new. It still looks amazing in any case. The P40 Pro is actually quite a small and compact feeling device as well. It is a little bit thicker than the S20 Ultra, but it's a lot smaller. The screen is smaller. And in general, it does feel like a one-handed type of device. They've made it more compact. It feels even more compact than the P30 Pro. The fingerprint sensors are both flagship grade. The P40 Pros is optical, the S20 Ultras is ultrasonic. But apart from that difference, the unlocking speeds are insignificant. They are both very good. What I did notice though is that the P40 Pro puts the fingerprint sensor quite high up on the screen. It's really, really high up, almost in the middle of the screen, which does feel kind of awkward sometimes. I would have preferred it a little bit lower on the screen. For example, where the S20 Ultra put it. I don't know why they put it there, but it's definitely really high up comparatively to pretty much all other phones. One thing you also get with that curved display at the bottom is that Huawei have had to crush down the bottom bezel components. So the speaker and the USB-C connector just are a little bit lower. It's not really a big difference, but it's just interesting to see how they had to do it. When it comes to the bezels and the front camera, I prefer personally the S20 Ultras because it's smaller and in the middle. The Huawei P40 Pro just has a gigantic notch and you really can't miss it. It is massive. They fit a depth sensor in there and an infrared sensor, but there's no ultra wide camera and there's no Face ID, 3D ID technology. So it's a huge bezel for just one useful front camera. The P40 Pro's colors are a little bit more vibrant in this picture, but just look how both cameras make the background really naturally blurry. They have really natural bokeh, and I would say there isn't one better or worse than the other. The colors are slightly different, but both very natural because they both have two very big sensors. I think the P40 Pro actually missed focus in this picture of the cone, but if you look at the tree in the background, you can see the P40 Pro uses HDR to brighten up the leaves, whereas those leaves are still a little bit darker on the S20 Ultra. This is again evident here where you can see the darker parts of the image on the P40 Pro are definitely brightened up using HDR, where they're allowed to be a little bit darker on the S20 Ultra. This is on the ultra wide, and notice how wide the S20 Ultra's image as is compared to the P40 Pros. Because the P40 uses the ultra wide mainly as a video camera, it doesn't have such a wide angle on its ultra wide, so it definitely is far wider on the S20 Ultra and on other phones. Main image sensor photography is what the Huawei really focused on. This image looks amazing on the Huawei. There's just so much contrast and grain in the image. It's a really unique look and it really stands out for me. Again, the S20 Ultra is just keeping the dark areas of the image slightly darker. I actually really like the colors and the exposure on that as well. As we move through the zoom ranges, I would say that the S20 Ultra just keeps a little bit more of a rich color in the image as is compared to the P40 Pro. Up to 10 times zoom, I think they both do really well. Into 30 times zoom, which this picture is, I think they just both get a little bit noisy, a little bit oil painting-ish. The S20 Ultra kept more natural colors. This is how my eye perceived the red on that fire hydrant. Whereas the red on the P40 Pro seems a little bit manufactured. It definitely wasn't that color in real life. The lighting conditions are actually quite dark when I was photographing this statue. As we zoom into 5 times, they're both using their periscope zoom cameras. Because the S20 Ultra uses a really high megapixel image sensor under there, I think that it does actually keep a little bit more detail. It is very close, however, and you could argue that there's a little bit more processing on the S20 Ultras, which creates a slightly more sharper image, but that looks like digital sharpening. And this example shows you how incredibly amazing the night mode is on the P40 Pro. The foreground was a really low light situation. It was dark and the background was very, very bright and blown out. In normal photo mode, which this is, you can see that there's actually a really natural look and change between the shadows and the highlights in the background. You can, however, see that the S20 Ultra keeps the darker parts of the image slightly darker than the Huawei, which has recognized those and tried to push the exposure up a little bit. When we switch to night mode, you can see the P40 Pro just changes completely. There's this rich texture in the image. It looks grainy. It looks like they have this amazing magic in the camera that really puts a ton of different exposures together and creates this amazing looking image. The foreground is exposed incredibly well now. The dynamic range is incredible between everything. It keeps the shadows and the light parts, but everything is exposed properly. It's really difficult to explain, but it just looks really great. When it comes to video, however, I tend to lean towards the S20 Ultras. I think the colors are a little bit richer, a little bit more saturated. It is kind of more pleasing to my eye anyway. Also notice that the P40 Pro records off the ultra wide camera as standard. That is what you'll be recording off if you switch to the video camera, whereas the S20 Ultra uses its main lens. You can of course switch to the ultra wide on the S20 Ultra very easily, but it doesn't default to that. In general, I think the S20 Ultra is more pleasing for me personally. I do like the colors and the exposure of it, but the P40 Pro does a very good job and they both go to 4K up to 60 frames a second. The S20 Ultra does have an 8K option as well, but I don't think most people are going to be using that anyway. So the light source is from the top right hand side. You can see on the P40 Pro, it's actually slightly overexposed on the light parts of my face where the light is hitting it. On the S20 Ultra, it looks much more natural, much more like an actual camera took it. The highlight roll off is very natural. You can see the P40 Pro tries to make real life look better than it is. It tries to make everything stand out more poppy, more vibrant colors. When it comes to the power and gaming of the two phones, I think the S20 Ultra does steal a little march on the P40 Pro, mainly because of two reasons. The first is that it has a 120Hz display, which is pretty much the best spec you're going to get, and you know Samsung make those great displays. Also, I'm using the Snapdragon version of the S20 Ultra, so it does beat the P40 Pro in terms of benchmarks. In any case, you can play PUBG on the highest settings on the P40 Pro and the S20 Ultra as well. But you get that higher refresh rate on the S20 Ultra. A strange thing I found with the P40 Pro is because of the curved display at the top, there is no earpiece and no speaker up there. Actually, when you're viewing videos or listening to music, it will only use the bottom firing speaker and give you a mono speaker experience. The only time the audio comes out of the top is when you're listening to an earpiece type of audio. So if you're on a phone call or if you're listening to audio recordings in a chat message app, when you raise it to your ear, it will come out with an audio there, but there's no speaker. The quality is okay, not as good as a real speaker though. The S20 Ultra isn't much better. I don't think it has the best audio in a smartphone, but there is a tiny little earpiece up there, and when you do listen to audio, it will come out of both of the speaker boxes in the phone. Both of the phones have very good strengths and very few weaknesses. The photography on the P40 Pro, that is the main reason for this phone. Night mode and photographs just look fantastic. I think the S20 Ultra as a flagship phone overall just performs so well in pretty much every area, and also has that amazing 120Hz display, which for right now just can't be beaten. Subscribe for all the latest tech news and videos. That's it for now, but I'll see you in the next one.